For centuries, women were denied financial independence, from owning bank accounts and credit cards to holding property in their names. This historical exclusion has shaped women's relationship with finance, and it's only in recent times that women have begun to engage fully in the economic sphere. In this edition of the Digital Saloon, we will delve into the multifaceted issue of women's financial literacy. Our expert speakers will dissect the layers, causes, and impacts of this critical issue and examine the policies aimed at creating a more inclusive economic landscape, particularly in the MENA region. We will discuss the crucial role of financial institutions in promoting gender-sensitive products and services, explore innovative ways to enhance access to financial resources for marginalized women and groups, and critically evaluate policy interventions for women's financial empowerment. Our conversation will address the limitations of these policies, especially in adapting them to different contexts and regions. Join us for an enlightening and engaging discussion that will uncover the various aspects and contexts of financial empowerment and literacy. Stay tuned for more details.
Hi everyone, welcome to this 13th edition of Women Can Digital Saloon. Today we're going to speak about women and finance, women and finance inclusion. And I'm so happy to be on this call and on this Digital Saloon today with our esteemed guests. So we have Ingrid Shaheen with us, Programs Manager at Mosaic and Researcher. We have Chris Sagi, M&E Officer at Mosaic MENA and Human Rights Activist, and Jennifer Warfield, Empowerment Strategist for Women in Leadership. I will let you introduce yourselves and your organizations. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. My name is Jennifer Warfield. I have a 30-year career in financial services in the United States, and currently I am working with women from a financial empowerment standpoint.
Welcome, Ingrid.
Hello, I'm Ingrid Shaheen. I'm the Programs Manager at Mosaic. We are an organization that usually works with marginalized communities, mainly LGBTQIA+ individuals. My main work is basically on social movements, marginalized communities overall, intersectional justice. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you. Chris, over to you.
Hello, my name is Christabel Saadi. I'm the Meal Officer at Mosaic, and Ingrid already introduced our NGO and our work. I have my experiences in human rights in general, and we work on marginalized groups, especially the LGBTQIA+ community. Thank you.
Thank you. So my name is Mayssa Mrabet, connecting from Tunisia. I'm the head of an amazing network of tech innovation hubs across Africa. The NGO is called AfriLabs, and we have more than 500 tech innovation hubs across the 53 countries in Africa. Happy to be on this session and moderating this session as well. So financial independence is more than just a personal security measure. It's a cornerstone of achieving gender equality. While strides have been made in numerous sectors, persistent financial disparities between men and other genders, particularly women, continue to exist. These disparities are influenced by a multifaceted array of factors hindering women's financial autonomy and decision-making ability. So I'd like us to start with the role of financial institutions in promoting gender-sensitive products and services. Jen, what role can financial institutions play in promoting gender-sensitive products and services that meet the needs of women?
Well, it's a very important question throughout the world. Financial institutions have a very important role to play. They need to make sure that they're supporting the four emerging trends in this particular area. The first is education, obviously, and I think that begins with conversations like we're having now. Creating an environment where that kind of financial success is possible. The question of entrepreneurship and the increasing emphasis on that, as well as cultural norms. And the role of the financial institution can weigh in on each one of these areas. From an education perspective, there was a recent study that was done with women in the MENA region, and it noted that 62% of the respondents are interested in more financial education. And it's very important to note that only 10% of the respondents rated themselves very highly when it comes to their own financial knowledge. So that creates an interesting question for us. Where are folks getting their financial knowledge, and how can financial institutions begin to help fill that gap? So again, the study cited a number of different areas, the internet being one of them. So for those folks who have access to internet resources, that is an important consideration. And of course, content, good, valuable content provided by banks, investment companies, public and private partnerships. These are all ways that people can become more educated about things like that. But it's interesting to note that outside of friends and family, very, very few people are obtaining their financial knowledge through banks or through financial advisors. And that represents a tremendous opportunity for these companies. So if people are not pursuing them, that really calls to question how those institutions can begin to make themselves more available to be resources within the communities. On the entrepreneurship side, again, we have a number of different banks and lending institutions that can fill that particular type of need. Family businesses are something that we're starting to see more and more women take some degree of a role in, but again, that's very slow steps. And as we indicated here, it's not just about the dollars, it's about mentorship, it's about guidance, it's about resources outside of the dollars that financial institutions can really provide. Companies like UBS, Bank of America are really stepping up and starting to become more aware of these types of needs and trying to get information out there to be able to fill them for those underserved markets. When it comes to the environment, creating an environment for all of these things to really come to fruition, from a global perspective, women currently hold about 33% of the world's wealth. Currently, that's represented by about half of that from the United States. So that means that globally, we have a lot of opportunity for improvement. However, we are seeing about $786 billion worth of wealth being held in the hands of Middle Eastern women. So that represents, again, a positive trend. And in fact, over the last couple of years, we're starting to see more and more women outpacing men in growth of wealth. So we have some positive stories, we have some opportunities, but when it compared to some other regions where we're expecting the great wealth transfer to take place in the United States, that's going to be something like $80 trillion worth of wealth being transferred over the next 20 years into the hands of women. What we need to do is to be able to take that kind of momentum and move it into the rest of the world, because the headwinds that we see from a cultural norm perspective, from the perspective of care work and having women not be able to be compensated for a lot of the home care work that they're currently providing, takes away from their ability to be successful entrepreneurs and successful financial managers as well. In addition, lack of confidence. When people have a lack of confidence, they tend to abdicate their financial strategies and responsibilities to the remaining part of their families. Interestingly enough, we're starting to see that in the United States as well. So as we see more and more positive momentum begin in the United States and in other parts of the world with partnerships, public partnerships, private partnerships, companies reaching out, the financial institutions taking their role, that creates a better future for everyone. So as women gain more wealth, they tend to invest it a little bit differently. They're going to invest it in sustainability type of areas as well as philanthropic areas. So specifically those areas where women and girls causes are served, like a lot of the organizations that we know. And so this creates ultimately, with the more wealth going to more women, more opportunity creates the chance for a greater equitable future for everyone.
I love it. But according to you, how can financial institutions be held accountable for gender sensitive practices?
You know, that's an interesting question, because I think everyone agrees that it is a need and it's an important goal that we all have, but accountability tends to be a little bit more difficult in the area of financial services, partly because it is a highly regulated environment, and partly because with a lot of these financial institutions, the market tends to drive the behaviors of the organizations and the companies. So when it comes to these particular types of financial institutions, there is a burgeoning awareness of the opportunity out there, whether it's for women, whether it's for LGBTQ communities. There are more and more international companies focusing in these areas. So that certainly is the first step. The second part is, beyond creating an awareness, it's about creating an outreach, a belonging, an inclusiveness. And so, and that goes down to the actual manufacturing of products and services. And so what you see now in a heavily regulated environment, once upon a time, a lot of products, a lot of services were geared towards heterosexual marriage. And so now what you're seeing more and more is the awareness that those old rules no longer serve the public. So when you think about financial services, you can break it down into a couple of categories. You have sort of the protection side of things, where you're managing risk. And you have the opportunity side of things, things like saving, entrepreneurship, a little bit more future focused. And so when you look at the institutions that serve those particular areas, you are dealing with insurance on the protection side, as well as the banking and investment fields for the savings and opportunities. So what we're seeing more in the United States market and European markets, and I think we're going to start seeing this throughout the world, is again, the moving away from the strict requirements of traditional heterosexual marriage into financial relationships. In fact, it's interesting to note that the same-sex marriage in the United States was originally made available because of the estate tax in the United States. So it was a financial decision in the courts that ultimately made that available. So, so that was certainly a very worthwhile endeavor. And so the idea of finances is never far behind the idea of equity and inclusion for everyone. So when it comes to moving products in a more equitable fashion, things like mortgages, things like life insurance contracts, investment contracts, loans and lending, these are all areas that we're starting to see a lot more of a wider availability across the industry. And so beyond that, we're also seeing impact investors, and as I mentioned, private and public partnerships, moving more towards making those investments into the communities that represent a tremendous financial opportunity for the future. So ultimately, it may be the market that drives it, but by serving that market, it ends up being a win-win for everyone.
Yeah, and I'd love to maybe dig a bit deeper, Ingrid. How can we improve access to financial resources and credit for those marginalized group of women, such as rural women, LGBTQA plus women, migrant women, everyone that needs to be there and get access to these products?
So I guess this is a very multifaceted question, by the way. I'm glad that Jennifer mentioned many of the points that do intersect with this question as well. So I'm going to try to dive maybe deeper into things. Okay, so I think in order for us to understand why these communities are marginalized, I need to go way back. And if I go way back, I'm going to go to personal status laws, and I'm going to go to inheritance and how much money and capital we are putting in the hands of marginalized communities and women. When you talk about personal status laws, they are mainly in the region. They are mainly ruled by sectarianism, patriarchy, everything that we have been dealing with in a post-colonial society to a certain extent. So if you think about it, the legal aspect of things, you're talking about sectarianism and personal status laws and affecting inheritance, affecting access to capital, and thus affecting how much women and marginalized communities overall can invest and grow. Even if they have a small business, they have a startup, even if they have just a business idea that they need to develop. So this is a side that we need to take into consideration. I think it has been something over time that marginalized, disempowered communities further. I like to use the word disempowered because it is systemic and it is not something that just happened. And these communities are not just on the margins because, they are simply. And, Jennifer mentioned something about care economy overall and how much care work is essential in contributing to the global GDP, not just when it comes to the region overall. But if you think about it, this also comes from a patriarchal perspective that women are supposed to be nurturing, women are supposed to be taking care of the elderly and marginalized communities as well. So this is mainly something that is like a vicious circle. This is the work that is not compensated. And if it's compensated, then it's definitely underpaid. And this is the factor of intersecting identities and how much it can affect the compensation of a certain job. If you think about it, in the region, migrant workers are usually underpaid for care work. If we take into consideration that care work is the only thing that they do, because the amount of and the areas of tasks that they need to do is just unimaginable in the Gulf countries, in the SWANA region, and then they are very much undercompensated. And if you look at usually women, young girls who are relatively in bigger families or in family settings, they end up taking care of the elderly, they end up taking care of the children without really being compensated for it, which will also affect their income, their ability to save, how much money they have, and therefore their inclusion in everything that we are trying to do on a financial level, whether it's in informal or informal networks. And just to talk about informal networks even a bit more, because when we talk about marginalized communities, we tend to forget that most of them end up working in informal networks that are not regulated, which puts them in situations that are very precarious. And also, we tend to overlook other factors that may affect the inclusion of marginalized communities, like public transportation, gender expression, and how non-passing or passing individuals can really go through a lot while they're just going to the job. It is a small, very, very, very tiny detail that can affect the day-to-day activities that women, girls, and marginalized communities do in order for them to get a certain capital or a stable income to a certain extent. So when you talk about that, this is the bulk. So this means that you have not only less access to capital and less access to income, but you cannot save as well. So this is, if I always think about the vicious circle, it looks like it's something that really, it's a loop. And when you look at education and when you look at the financial illiteracy of most of these communities, you can understand why, which is also a point that was mentioned by Jennifer. You can understand why this is a vicious circle, because at the end of the day, I mean, we're an organization that does capacity development. And we try our best to empower LGBTQI plus individuals and to try to find funding for training programs that can really give agency to LGBTQI plus individuals, especially those who are refugees and migrant workers and trans people, the trans community, because it's a very critical case. So if you think about it, it's not just because the funding is limited or not, but the training is not always accessible for everyone. So you are having this digital illiteracy, financial illiteracy that is affecting the access of these individuals to jobs, or to any possibility for investment, to grow a small business, or call it whatever you want. So I think overall, these are some of the factors that can join Jennifer and but can give you more insights on the issues that we have when it comes to access to financial resources to these marginalized communities. Now, how can we improve it? The digital aspect or technology overall do play a big role in that, but it is a bit limited because not all members of the LGBTQIA plus community or marginalized groups or women and girls are digital savvies, you know, which takes us back to the slack as well that we tend to not take into consideration when we want to empower or develop the capacities of certain communities. I also think that maybe the first step would be to rethink the kafala system, the sponsorship, how much we're putting pressure on migrant workers and how much we are controlling every aspect of their employment, their immigration status, how restrictive the system is overall, and how it's affecting a big chunk of the population, which is migrant workers and not just women and girls. You have a lot of people from the LGBTQI plus community who are also migrant workers and dealing with the same circumstances. I also think that it's something that we might be really talking further about later on, which is the austerity measures that the IMF is currently imposing on many of the countries and that in the region. So I think if we want to improve access for marginalized communities, we need to take into consideration that austerity measures will reduce the funding for maternal and child health programs. They would reduce funding for everything that is related to social welfare, honestly. And this will affect the access of these communities further, and this will put more pressure on them. So I think overall, if we start thinking about these little details before we try to find something on a bigger scale, it would be very helpful for marginalized communities. And it would give them access to more formal networks where things are more regulated, when they have more rights to a certain extent, and where they are fairly compensated for the work that they are doing.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to continue with you, Ingrid, and looking into some historical initiatives, like, what are the manifestations of the historical background of women and finance in today's world? And what is the impact? What is the real impact on women today? Can you provide some examples?
Yeah. Cannot really go back in time this much and provide you with very specific examples that are from the region, sadly. And yeah. I tend to not import success stories. I tend to not do that. It just baffles me that sometimes we have to. I think I kind of answered the question at first when I was talking about the laws that we are currently dealing with after colonialism. When we are talking about patriarchy, compulsory heterosexuality. Also, Jennifer talked about this idea of this heteronormative family, nuclear family, that is also affecting the role of the woman and the role of more marginalized communities within bigger families. So I think when we talk about more historical, like if I need to draw a certain timeline of how things developed, it did start with the dependence on sectarianism and religion in most of the interpersonal relations, and as well as the more legal side of things when we talk about personal status laws. And this shows you to a certain extent that being a woman, you will be definitely marginalized within your family when it comes to inheritance. You will not have access to capital, you will not have access to cash. Usually, if you have access to cash, depending on, again, it depends on the religion, it is very much limited. Women in the region are not supposed to have a home, cannot have a house on their own. They're usually with their brothers or like the present male figure in the family. So this also puts more dependence to a certain extent, and it leaves you this vicious circle again of not having access to capital, not being able to save money, and therefore you are not being able to invest and not being able to be active in different initiatives, even if they are for startups, small businesses. You do not really have access to that as well. So basically, I think this is where things started and just developed further. We can talk about capitalism and all of that and how it contributed further to the marginalization of disempowered communities. But I think if we maybe think about ways where we can include these communities further, it would be more, how can I say? Okay, we tend to talk a lot about the context that we're in, and the historical background and everything. And sometimes I think it is very much necessary to put all our expertise together and try to figure out a way, because no one is going to figure out the way for you, because marginalized communities are still used as scapegoats. And when we have any problem, war, genocide, call it whatever you want, any problem that is political or not, we tend to put women and marginalized communities on the side. This is not a priority at the moment. So maybe if we can brainstorm more ways to tackle the stereotypes that we are currently facing, and to find more ways to include these communities, that would be good. Yeah.
That's fantastic. That's my next question to Chris. Actually, like, how can we challenge those stereotypes that you just quoted? Like, how can we implement strategies and for challenging stereotypes and promote a more inclusive financial culture that would empower all the marginalized, figures?
Thank you so much for your questions. And I believe we have a lot of tools that we can that can help us implement strategies for challenging the stereotypes and to promote a more inclusive financial culture for women, and specifically for women in the LGBTQIA+ community. Firstly and foremost, I think education and awareness, just like Jennifer said earlier, this is a very important tool. And specifically to develop a financial literacy programs tailored specifically to women in the LGBTQIA+ community, because it's kind of different when it's not about the community. And these programs should cover several topics. We can talk about budgeting, investing, any financial topic, focusing on the unique challenges that this community face. And also to conduct maybe workshops, seminars in the community centers to provide accessible financial education and resources, because we know education is not accessible always for women, and specifically for women in the LGBTQIA+ community. And also, it is important to develop and offer financial products and services that address the unique needs of women, and again, specifically women in the LGBTQIA+ community, such as healthcare insurance, which that should cover, let's say, gender-affirming treatments, and estate planning services that recognize diverse family structures. We have a lot of examples when it comes to the financial products. And also, it is very important to talk about policies and practices, non-discrimination policies, if we can say, to advocate for and implement strong anti-discrimination policies within the financial institutions, and to ensure that these policies are enforced and there are clear channels for reporting and addressing discriminations if founded. And also, it is very crucial to work with the policymakers themselves to support laws that protect women and women in the LGBTQI plus community from discrimination in the financial services and employment. Um, Also, it is very important to have community engagement and advocacy. And at Mosaic, I can say we work in this category a lot uh, to create and support networks and organizations that provide this financial advice and support for women in the LGBTQIA plus community, and to have maybe collaborations with other organizations to partner with the advocacy group to reach a broader audience and ensure financial education and services are inclusive and accessible for everyone. And while focusing on establishing a safe space where the women and LGBTQI plus community, women in the community can discuss financial challenges and seek advice without the fear of this discrimination that we always face. And finally, I think research is helpful everywhere. So to conduct research by the women in the LGBTQI plus community to understand the financial challenges faced by women in this community, and to use this data that we have to inform policies, programs, services, and everything, and also to assess the impact of these initiatives that are aimed at empowering the LGBTQI plus community, women, sorry, financially, and adjust the policies and also the strategies based on these findings, and to ensure that these women are visible in financial reports and research, because sometimes we find them like we feel like they are invisible, and to highlight their specific needs and progress.
Thank you. Thank you. And how can we engage men and other stakeholders in, putting in place these solutions? And this question is for all of you. My next couple of questions, I want to have insights and sharing from all of you. So I don't know, Chris, if you want to start, or maybe we can give the floor to Jennifer or Ingrid.
Well, I can say from my point of view that we can engage men and other stakeholders, specifically in policies and anti-discrimination policies, because it's very sad to see that most of the policymakers are men, and most of the people providing the services are also like, it's very important to have the awareness sessions, the education, and the policies to be seen by other stakeholders, and to be looked in and the challenges and discrimination that this community and the women are facing, and for them to understand what's happening.
Anything to add?
Certainly, absolutely. Those are very important points. Trying to engage more than just the communities that we're focusing on here is key, as Chris mentioned. When it comes to the financial services industries, there is a greater and greater awareness of the industry's unique needs. In the past, we have seen the industry approach things in a very one-dimensional fashion. And as the industry has evolved, there has been an awakening to the importance of serving a diverse community. And so, by expanding efforts with advisors and institutions to try to reach a greater level of consumer base, that tends to be in the best interest of those sort of capitalistic sort of organizations. But again, as I said before, it's really a win-win, because by serving communities, that creates financial opportunity for the advisor, for the firm, as well as the consumer. So by building financial literacy and doing those things from a ground up approach, you are creating relationships that are going to last over a lifetime. I mentioned earlier about the transfer of wealth. In those estimations, a great majority of the folks who are expecting that wealth transfer do not have guidance or advice, don't have advisors that they're anticipating to be able to help them through that process. So it really creates a huge gap for those women that ultimately will be the decision makers in the future. A lot of them are young women. So you're not only looking at a diverse community from a gender perspective, you're also looking at a demographic difference as well. So by building these bridges now, trying to build financial literacy programs like Chris mentioned, getting out there and educating people at a younger age, that creates a better future for all of our general societies.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Ingrid?
I think most of the points were mentioned, but okay. There is a saying that I absolutely adore, which is nothing about us without us. And I think this joins the participatory approach that Chris was mentioning as well, and as well as Jennifer. So I think including these communities in everything in our talks to find alternatives, because really I'm not a big fan of gatekeeping and keeping everything between the hands of experts, because if you think about it, when women are given the chance, they do end up employing more women. And when marginalized communities are given the chance, they do employ more of the marginalized communities because they know the challenges. So if you think about it, sometimes maybe peer-to-peer support, creating a certain space where we can share experiences, fill certain intergenerational gaps. I mean, some things that worked with the older generation could really be useful for younger people who are trying to start a business. I think I'm a big fan of mutual aid, and I think this is maybe we try to take it away from the queer context and apply it to everything. So this participatory approach overall can give us a more collective approach towards the same problems that most of us are dealing with. So yeah, I think mostly this brings like both of your ideas together. So I do think that including these communities, giving them the lead to really choose what they want, and where are the gaps that we need to fill. And I think this is something that we've also been trying to work on in Mosaic, because if you think about it, we do tend to talk on behalf of communities. So you know what, let's just put these communities in one relatively safe space and just give them basic information about what they can do. And you're going to be amazed, honestly. So yeah, basically this is it, the participatory approach, and that's it. Agency, I guess. Give them agency, because I don't like when we put marginalized communities and women and girls in this box of them being helpless and they really need the guidance overall. Sometimes it's just a matter of support. Sometimes it's a matter of answering a simple question. And I think this is what also Jennifer meant when she was talking about guidance and how people are mentoring each other in the process overall. So yeah.
And I think we lose the bigger picture of inclusion and a bigger picture of inclusion opportunities there. So yeah, couldn't agree. Chris, you talked a lot about policy, right? You started the conversation there, but I would want us to go back there and see if you have some examples of policy interventions that had a real target to improve women's success and access to financial resources and opportunities. I don't know if one of you can share some examples that will help us, understand the impact of this kind of policies.
One of the things I would say is that as much as I've been talking about financial institutions today, there are other affiliated groups within the financial services industry that might be a potential area to tap into. So a lot of organizations, licensure organizations, offer or promote the idea of doing sort of pro bono work And so having that kind of a mindset within the industry outside of the companies that manufacture the products, I think creates an overall culture of giving back. And beyond that, again, collaboration. The thing that hearing Ingrid and Chris talk about, the thing that I was reminded of is that this is not a zero-sum game. When women and marginalized communities and LGBTQ plus succeed, it's not taking away from anyone else. There is always more opportunity. There is always more chance for growth and success and abundance. And so by trying to cultivate that mindset, I think serves everyone ultimately in the long run.
Thank you. Couldn't agree more. Anything else to add, Chris, maybe?
I agree totally with Jennifer, and I actually had the same idea about changing the mindset that we're working with, and changing the way that we see policies in general and the collaborations that we can make. And if we give someone the chance to do something that can change an entire community, I mean, they will do it and it will be perfect. But it's only about giving chances. It's about like trusting the person in front of us that you're not unseen. You are here and you can do whatever another person can do. So just take the chance and do it. And just like Ingrid said, you'll be surprised what will come from this kind of communities and people, which is very great.
Thank you. Maybe one last question that is out of the script, but what role can entrepreneurial ecosystems have in order to be part to be part of these discussions and maybe support impactful startups to innovate and help women and marginalized communities financial inclusion?
Sure. One of the things I've seen throughout entrepreneurial communities is that people are always willing to answer questions and to guide the next generation. And so creating environments where people can come together, whether it's community business organizations or, again, maybe particular constituencies coming together. I think that just giving people a forum to connect in that way naturally creates the conversation and creates the mentorship. Again, my experience has been that people are happy to share, happy to connect and really bond over similar experiences. And so by creating some sort of forum for that sort of connection, that's something that works very well. In the United States, you have different networking organizations, you have communities, you have again, business organizations that are geographic or regional, and those are chances for people to come together and to learn from one another and to perhaps even do business together. So again, creating that sort of budding entrepreneurial opportunity for women and for LGBTQ plus people, I think gives that a little, that whole idea of agency and confidence. It gives them the training wheels so that they can ultimately sort of blossom into their own success story.
Yeah, like a few years ago, I was working for an impact investing fund, and it was supporting social businesses, supporting rural women, into the financial inclusion. The idea was not the idea, and there was a startup who came and say, okay, how can we help these women get into the formal system? These are, having incomes, but they're not being part of the legal system. They won't have access to retirement tomorrow. And he put in place like, the whole system to support these women. And he was able because, he was a change maker living in that area, and he knew about the challenges there and the problems there. So he made a solution that was really like, adapted to the region and to those women, especially in the agriculture sector. And yeah, he got the support. I think this is really important to have different stakeholders within the innovation value chain of supporting startups to support this kind of businesses as well. We see a lot of initiatives heavy on supporting tech and very innovative startups, while sometimes it's really important also to work on these communities as well and to serve them as well, because it could be, operating on a challenge, on a very specific challenge, and be also sustainable at the end of the day. Well, really, thank you. I really enjoyed this session today. Thank you, Momentum, for giving us this opportunity, to gather all together and have these open heart discussions and sharings. Maybe one final thoughts before wrapping up the session. Ingrid, do you want to start first?
Okay, so I do agree on the idea of networking. I do encourage the wonderful ideas that we have just put on the table. But I also think that, Mayssa, you said something that is quite applicable. Contextualizing the approach further. So I think maybe trying to see the context that we are operating in overall, and letting our interventions be that specific. Because if you think about it, if I want to talk about legal reforms, okay, they happened in Tunisia, they happened in Morocco. We have a few interventions that happened in the region, but did it help in the inclusion of women and marginalized communities in the workspace, in the economy overall? Is care work still undercompensated? Yes. Is it still underpaid? Yes. So I think it depends on the legal reform that we want specifically, and what is the idea of informed policy as well, policy making, the research. And I think this also starts with needs assessments, conversations with the individuals who are actually affected by this, because as much as we say that we get what these communities need, we really need to ask them after all. So also networking depends on the context. I mean, in Lebanon, we do have many intergenerational gaps. We do have many gaps that have led to discrepancies in coordination between different movements, between different collectives. So this is quite interesting when you take it in like the context of every country. So I think the last point would be contextualizing interventions and trying our best to cater to the needs of the communities that we want to serve. In everything, not just when it comes to financial literacy, or when it comes to training sessions, when it comes to capacity development, overall in all sectors. So.
Thank you. Chris?
I actually have nothing to add. I just want to say thank you for this opportunity, and it was a very nice conversation. And it's very nice listening to the experience and to the expertise of others, and it's very interesting. So thank you.
Thank you. Jennifer?
Yes, I echo that. This has been a wonderful experience for me, and I really appreciate and I'm grateful for being invited to learn and to share. And again, just thinking in terms of keeping up the efforts and in spite of challenges and headwinds and difficulties that we all experience. These are all worthwhile efforts, and I'm really heartened by the great work that my colleagues here are doing, and I look forward to a great future ahead. So thank you very much.
Thank you everyone, and yeah, looking forward for the 14th edition of this Momentum Digital Saloon. Bye everyone.
Bye guys, thank you so much. Bye everyone.
Bye.